My name is Dr. Arun Dhir, and in today's video, we are going to be talking about this one practice of dieting and how it is sabotaging your long-term results of weight loss success. Friends, I'm a gastrointestinal and a weight loss surgeon, and I've practiced my craft for over 2.5 decades. I'm an author of 2 books, one of them being Happy Gut, Healthy Weight, which really centers around how your weight is regulated by this thing called as metabolism. So let's dive straight into this topic of dieting. And I think let me suffice it by saying that the practice of dieting has been it has become so fashionable, I should say, that almost every week we are hearing of a new diet that comes up. Whether it's a paleo diet, it's a keto diet, or it's a 5-2 diet. I think the basic principles of how dieting works has been grossly misunderstood, and what long-term damage it creates on our body is something which is not very well understood. So it's a bit of a reactive or a knee-jerk response when people decide to go on a diet. So dieting basically is of one of 2 types. Either it is a calorie restriction, which means that it is totally focused on restricting the amount of calories that you are consuming, or it is category restriction. So calorie restriction on one side, or category restriction, which means you can't take, say, carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are always condemned that they are the worst offenders, or you can't take certain proteins, or you can't take fats. It could be one or the other thing. So one category of foods is actually restricted from your diet. So that's what is called category restriction. Friends, the bottom line is that whenever we restrict calories or we restrict certain calories, it takes out of balance what we call as a balanced diet. It creates an imbalance in that system. And that's what causes our body, when you go on a diet, it triggers a stress response. The body thinks there is famine. That means there is shortage of food, and that is what triggers the cortisol hormone production, which is a stress hormone, as we know. What cortisol does is it creates a preferential deposition of fat in the middle part of the abdomen. Fatty liver, omental fat, visceral fat, all those things are similar names, and it increases the waistline, which we know increases your risk of developing metabolic syndrome or diabetes. But what it also does, the famine response, is it lowers the metabolic rate, because body is trying to adapt to this famine or the calorie restriction that the individual is engaging in. But what it also does is, as a compensatory mechanism, it increases the hunger hormones. So these thoughts of food are always there, and that is what creates this kind of your inner imbalance. When the individual is on a diet for a period of time and they find it hard to sustain, because that is the challenge with most of the diets, is they are not sustainable in the long run, they let go, they go off diet, and that triggers almost a binge response. And what happens is we call it the feasting response. So famine response and feasting response. And what the feasting response does is the body naturally craves for high calorie, high sugar foods, which are the comfort foods, and it's almost like a vicious circle. And what happens, friends, because the metabolic rate is already low, because the body knows that this is not the first dieting cycle, it may be that there is another famine around the corner, the body is still trying to store everything with the low metabolic rate. And that is what leads to progressive weight gain. This is called yo-yo dieting, and that is what leads to what we call as a trap. It's almost like a trap. You feel you're dieting, you lose the initial few kilos, and then after that the weight again starts to gain. It's almost like you are in a trap, and that is where the whole relationship, your relationship with food gets mucked up, because you are making reactive choices versus making responsive choices. So what is the way out of this? So firstly, in my practice, we refrain from using the word diet, because it automatically gives the impression to individuals that there is some things that are going to be excluded, some things that are going to be included. I have already failed this. So it sets the individual up for failure. So what we say is, you got to understand two concepts regarding your meals. And what it is firstly, what is it that you put in your mouth? And secondly, when do you put it? Both the things are equally important. So let's have a look at what. So I often say the first point in what is the 80-20 rule. 80% of the time you focus on predominantly whole food, plant-based diet. So what that means is fruits, vegetables, whether you have them raw as salads, you can add superfoods into it, things like, quinoa, kale, all those kind of things. And the other 20% of the time is when you have things like a little bit of chicken, a little bit of fish. You can have even a dark chocolate. And if it is your best friend's birthday, there's no problem in having a piece of chocolate cake. No problems, So the point I'm trying to make is the more you restrict your body that I can't have this or can't have, diets are unsustainable, friends, and that is the biggest challenge, that the body revolts. So 80-20 rule is something that allows you to have a nice blend of still putting in good fiber, plant-based fiber, which is something that boosts the good gut bacteria, which is responsible for a healthy metabolism. Second thing is the practice of a detox day. Once every fortnight, and that's what I personally practice, and I recommend my patients and clients to do that as well, is the practice of detoxing, which is by way of juicing, taking raw fruits and vegetables and salads, and avoiding dairy, gluten, processed foods and meats from your diet. So as long as you're able to do that, that gives you a very good detox, and this is a practice that was being done for centuries, and the practice of fasting is extremely beneficial. The next side is when. So it's important to know what to eat, but then it's equally important to know when to put food in your mouth. So first thing that I recommend is daytime eating practice, which means from morning 8 o'clock till about 6 in the evening. That is the time when the body's metabolism is really active. You are up and about. But what happens is that most of us in the Western societies are so used to having the heaviest meal of the day late in the evening, and what happens is after that we go off to sleep. The body does not get a chance to metabolize that, and it gets stored as fat. This, by the way, is the basis of intermittent fasting. So that's number one. Second strategy is to eat small and often. I often say that don't go hungry more than 3 hours between meals, basically. So after breakfast, in about 2 or 3 hours time, have some nuts, have a piece of fruit, so that by lunchtime you are not sort of so hungry, or by dinner time you're not so hungry that you could eat a whole pizza and still feel hungry. So eat small but frequently. You can have fruits, you can have teas, you can drink teas, I should say, because many a times the body is more thirsty than it is hungry. The third strategy is that of stress management. Friends, as we have seen over here, stress causes increase in the cortisol level production, which is unhealthy and unhelpful for the body's metabolism, and especially for the weight loss strategies. The fourth one is an interesting one over here, which I put over as television viewing strategy. Now, if you see this carefully, when people are watching screens, they have a natural urge to go for food and put something in their mouth, and most of the times it is those unhealthy foods. And I say that have a television viewing snack box, which has got some carrot sticks, celery sticks, a little bit of hummus, pieces of fruit, some grapes, whatever it may be. But the key thing is that you are not going for those unhealthy foods while you're watching a screen, and that can be contributing to developing unhealthy relationship with food once again. Because every time you are putting food in your mouth when you're distracted, you just don't know how much you're having. So at least put in food that is going to heal you rather than hurt you. So I hope you have found this video helpful and informative. If you liked it, please subscribe to my channel, as it helps us to reach people who are in need. And I will look forward to seeing you in my next video.